So good morning and welcome to our webinar today on our COVID-19 online retail scheme, which is scheduled to go live for applications next week. We're just waiting on one or two final confirmations from DPER, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, on some of the technicalities. I'm Stephen Hughes and I head up the consumer retail team within Enterprise Ireland. We do not need any reminding on how the retail sector has been impacted by the COVID crisis. One of the ways that the sector can start to rebuild is through a fuller and more strategic use of the online channel to market, both domestically and internationally. Today's webinar is to highlight the key issues that need to be considered by companies when addressing this issue and to help them make a full and complete application to the retail scheme. The scheme should also be considered in the context of the LEO online trading voucher scheme, which has also had additional budget allocated to it and which is to assist companies who are at an earlier stage in the online journey. The main presenter today will be my colleague Mary Cloak from our e-marketing team, and who's been working with me and a number of our other colleagues in getting the scheme ready. Mary has extensive experience on the whole area of online and so well positioned to give guidance on this. I'll also be joined by my colleague Owen O'Brien in the Q&A session later on. I would also like to mention our colleagues in the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, and in particular Celine McHugh and Deborah Dignam, who worked closely with us over the last couple of weeks in getting this programme to life. And then finally, in the thank box, I'd also like to extend my appreciation to the various trade and business associations who have shared details on the webinar and the scheme at short notice to members. In this, can I include RG Data, Retail Excellence, Retail Ireland, CSNA, the Irish Hardware Association, the Irish Pharmacy Union, Digital Business Ireland, and of course the local enterprise office network. I should say that all eligible Irish retailers can apply to the scheme and they don't need to be connected to an industry body to do so. This is the third call we have made on our online retail scheme, and in this call we have made a number of significant changes to make the scheme more accessible and relevant to the wider retail sector. In Mary's presentation today, not only will she highlight these changes, but she'll also focus on the key do's and don'ts in making a positive application. Mary's presentation will take approximately 20 minutes, and you can submit questions on the chat line, and we will answer as many as we can here today, but we have some limited time of about 45 minutes. We will also post answers on our website under a scheme guidance document, and we'll do that continuously when the scheme is open, and we will update it regularly from once we go live under that scheme guidance document. And you can send any questions or queries you have to retail@enterpriseireland.com. One final point I'd like to emphasize before handing over to Mary is to ask you not to wait until the last minute of the call open to submit your applications. Things can go wrong, and if you miss the deadline close time, your application will not be included in the evaluation. So I would encourage you to do it the day before or even the week before, but please do not wait till the last minute to do so. We want to max out on the available budget for this, and we want retailers to get it. So we want to make sure that everybody can be included, or is included, who can be included. Finally, as I said, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website should you need to review any of the points covered. So Mary, it's over to you now for the next 20 minutes.
That's great, Stephen. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so much interest in finding out more about the scheme. I'd like to take 20 minutes or so to give you some information on the new COVID-19 online retail scheme. And okay, this is what I plan to cover. Firstly, I'll go through an introduction to the scheme, including the objectives. Then I'll take you through the application process using our online application system. Next, I'll give you some details about key areas that your application should cover, followed by details of what costs are eligible for support and what we won't cover. And finally, I'll take you through the evaluation process and some key learnings from previous calls, which I hope you'll find useful. This scheme was developed by the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation and Enterprise Ireland to support SMEs to develop their online presence. The total fund for this call is €2 million, and we're hoping to fund around 60 projects on a competitive basis. This scheme responds to a need identified by the department to develop Irish retailers' online capability in order to sustain the sector through the current crisis. And by supporting retailers, the hope is that the sector will develop a more competitive online offer, which will help them to compete domestically and help their ambition to compete internationally. This slide shows some of the main features of the scheme. As I've said previously, the fund size for this call is €2 million. This is a competitive call with funding of up to 40,000 or 80% of expenditure. And the costs cover two main areas. Firstly, we'll cover the costs of a project champion, and secondly, the fees of a service provider who will help you to develop your digital strategy. In terms of eligibility, you should be an Irish-owned retailer who employed more than 10 people on the 29th of February 2020. You must have an existing online presence, and this can be a website, Facebook page, Instagram, or other social media. You must have a retail outlet and derive the majority of your income from this outlet or outlets. You should show an ambition in the application to export in the future. Your application should show a minimum expenditure of €12,500. And using this figure, we would give you a 10,000 grant, and up to 50% of that can include salary costs. And I have some examples of this later in the presentation. There are some exclusions regarding franchisees, hotels, restaurants, and other activities such as gaming, tobacco products, cannabis products. And more details of these can be found on the website and in the application. So, how do you apply for the grant? You'll apply using Enterprise Ireland's online application system, even though you are not and will not become a client of Enterprise Ireland. Firstly, you'll need to register with our online application system, giving your name and contact details. An email will then be sent to you to set a password and enable login, and you must complete the registration process within 72 hours. There will be a link on the retail website once this call is open, and the retail website is www.enterprise-ireland.com/retail. Details are on the last slide. Okay, so once you get your login details approved and you log into the system, a similar screen to this one will appear, giving you the option to start the application. You'll take the option in the orange box on the right-hand side, which you should see, which says make a new application and begin. And then the application you'll be applying for is called the Covid-19 Online Retail Scheme. The first thing you'll be asked for before you progress to the application is to confirm these eligibility criteria. I'm sorry, I know this is a busy slide and difficult to read, but all of this information is on the website and you can pick it up there or when you actually go through your application. If you answer negatively to any of these criteria, you won't be allowed to progress as you're not eligible. And we strongly advise that you don't continue if you're not eligible, because we do check and it will be caught later by our grants department and you'll have wasted time on an application that won't progress. However, if you are in doubt on any of the criteria, please email in your query and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Okay, so what are the key areas to cover in your application? We're looking for a really well thought out project plan, one that makes sense for your business. When you're writing your application, you should assume that we don't know you or your business. So please tell us about your current online position, your web presence, who your target market is, what internal skills you have or need, or if you're working with an agency at the moment. What are your aims and objectives of the project? What are you trying to achieve or improve? You'll also need to demonstrate the need for funding. Why is this funding needed? Are you losing customers to online, or are you trying to diversify into a niche area or a new market? What impact do you hope this will have on your business in terms of, for example, sales, skills, finances? I suppose it's about what difference will this grant make to your business? And then what resources do you have? Do you have somebody dedicated, an online person dedicated at the moment, or do you have an external resource? Part of the application is you'll need to give us details of your service provider or your consultant. Now is the time to engage with them. The earlier you contact them, the better developed plan you will produce in your application. And finally, make sure you give us a good breakdown of costs, tasks, activities, number of days going to be spent on each activity, and daily rates of your consultants. The bottom line here is tell us your story. The more we understand your business, the better the application is going to be. Okay, so here are some of the typical costs covered by the scheme. We'll cover the salary costs of a senior project champion up to a maximum of €200 per day. This person is generally somebody who's senior in the company and who will work with the external provider to implement and push through the project. We will allow costs for one internal champion. We'll also cover the costs of an external service provider or providers. I would really encourage you to talk to at least 2 or 3 providers in order to get a good fit for your company. Each provider may have a different approach, and it's really important that you get a good match and that you're going to be happy to work with them over the next 12 months. We have compiled a list of interested service providers, which is on our website. But just remember, you are not obligated to use anybody on this list. The choice of provider is ultimately yours. And lastly, in terms of funding, this must be used to introduce additional functionality to your online presence. It can also include in-house training on e-commerce or e-marketing type activities. So, what are the ineligible costs? Well, we won't cover upgrades to your existing online channels that you needed to do anyway. We won't cover hardware or off-the-shelf software costs or subscriptions. And the reason we don't cover these is that we want you to maximize the internal capability building in your company. Otherwise, all the grant could go to one-off costs. We won't cover online advertising campaigns, for example, Google Ads or Facebook ads. And lastly, we won't cover costs that are incurred before you applied for this grant. We've put this slide together to run through some sample scenarios regarding costs. I'm conscious that the text on this slide it may be a little small for you to see again, so just to let you know, we will have the slides available for downloading after the webinar, and we'll send you copies of all of them or links to it after when we finish the webinar. I'll just go through sample 1, where the company proposed to spend $26,400 with their chosen service provider, and then they claimed $23,000 in the salary costs. So their total eligible expenditure is both of those together, which is $49,400. And based on this, with the grant payable at 80%, the grant would be €39,520. Just a few costs, or a few points regarding your internal champion. Your internal champion costs cannot exceed the costs of your external service provider. And the maximum daily rate that you can claim for your champion is €200 per day. Now, this is going to be based on their salary. So in other words, if they're not earning €200 a day, this will be capped. And lastly, you don't have to include internal champion costs. You can submit an application with just service provider costs. So onto our evaluation process. An evaluation panel comprising of staff members from Enterprise Ireland will review all of the applications and score the proposals against these criteria. And a representative from the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation will be included in the evaluation process as well. Each project will be evaluated according to the following weightings. Firstly, the quality of the proposal and the potential impact on the business, which has a weighting of 40%. And here we're looking at the objectives and credibility of the proposed project. We'll be looking at the costs and the quality of the work plan and how it can be delivered in a 12-month framework. And we'll also be trying to see how this plan can support future growth in the company. The second evaluation criteria is around the impact of proposed changes on the competitive position and viability of the company, which is also weighted at 40%. Excuse me. Here we want to see how the project can improve the competitive position of the company and how it can support the viability of the company from the COVID-19 crisis. The proposal should outline the expected impact on the company's potential to remain viable and achieve future growth in terms of, for example, job retention, creation, sales opportunities. And here you should also demonstrate the need for state support. The third criteria is around your ambition to internationalize the business. And here we're looking to see what your ambition is around selling into export markets at present or in the future. Finally, your company's financial track record. This is standard practice for any Enterprise Ireland grant supports. We need to know that the company is not insolvent and that the support will have a good impact. So we're looking for an assessment of the company's trading history to date and the financial viability of the company. And just to note, one of the conditions of your application is that you submit 2 years statutory accounts. Okay, so here's some learnings from the previous calls, which hopefully you'll find useful. Last year, we ran 2 calls for the online retail scheme. And here are some of the learnings, which will hopefully help you put together a good application. In both of our previous calls, we've had problems with late applications. Submitting your application is a 2-stage process. Firstly, you submit the application itself. Then you get a bounce back email from Enterprise Ireland asking you to submit your accounts separately but before the deadline. Many companies got caught out with this deadline as they thought submitting the application was all that was required and they missed the email asking for their accounts. I would strongly recommend that you don't leave it until the closing date to start or submit this application, because as we all know, technology will fail us when we most need it. So I guess my advice is please submit your application early and read the email correspondence from us. Don't just assume it's a bounce back email. Please read it. In terms of the criteria, if you don't meet the qualifying criteria, just remember we do check and your application will be rejected if it doesn't meet the criteria. Many companies didn't include internal champion costs or didn't complete all the sections in the application. So my advice would be to take the option on the online application system to download a PDF copy of the application before you submit it and check your application to make sure you've included all the details and the costs you want to apply for. With regard to your service provider, take your time choosing your service provider. Many companies didn't give enough planning or thought in choosing their service provider, and many had to change consultant either before the application or before the project started or during. Many companies put in costs, for example, Google AdWords, application development, which were discounted and ultimately led to them receiving a reduced grant. So just make sure that you know that the costs that you're putting in are eligible. And finally, funding is to address e-commerce capability development and not subvent some existing costs. So in summary, we need to know that your company has looked at and has a good understanding of the impact that increased e-commerce activities will have on your business. Is e-commerce right for you, or are you just applying because the funds are available? Websites need to be constantly promoted. Have you got an understanding of the cost of acquiring and retaining customers and the internal skills and resources required to make it happen? Your service provider selection is really, really important. Make sure that they have the skill sets and the capacity, especially at the moment, that's required to make things happen. And finally, please submit your application early and make sure you read all the emails that we send back to you regarding submitting your accounts. Okay, lastly, here are some links which I hope you'll find useful. There's a link to where all the content will be stored at www.enterprise-ireland.com/retail and the retail mailbox. So any queries you have should be directed to that retail mailbox. As this is a competitive call, once the call opens, Enterprise Ireland staff cannot discuss individual applications. However, if you have specific queries, you can email them to this retail mailbox, and we will answer them regularly in a scheme guidance document, which we'll publish on the website and we'll update regularly. So just again, we'll upload this webinar and slides to our website, and which we'll also share with registered participants. I hope you found that useful. I'll pass back to Stephen and the question and answer session.
Thank you, Mary. We've had a very active chat line coming in on questions. So I will pick out ones as I go through it. I won't be able to cover them all, but I will pick out ones that I think will be of relevance to a wide number of people. Okay, so I'm also going to be joined by my colleague Owen O'Brien here, and myself and Mary, and I'll pass questions to Owen and Mary as we will run through the chat line. I will read out the questions. I know everybody can't see the questions that are coming, but I will read out the question, and then either I, Mary, or Owen will give an answer to that question. So just starting from the top, okay. What day do you expect the call to open, and how will I know when it is open? So we're expecting the call to open next week. We intend leaving it open for 4 weeks, and we will send a notification to everybody who has participated in this webinar that it is open. So you can be notified directly that it is open. As we have a workforce of only 7 people, does that definitely exclude me from applying to the scheme? And the answer is yes. This is a scheme for companies that have 10 or more full-time equivalent employees as of the 29th of February 2020. Anybody that falls below that in terms of numbers of employed should really be looking to the Leo online trading voucher scheme, which I would encourage people to consider. Owen, this is what I'm going to pass to you. So, can the salary or part thereof of an employee hired for web design purposes but carries out other retail duties while creating an e-commerce website be claimed through this scheme?
Thanks, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. That's, I think, a really good question. I think that the first piece on that is that we're very conscious that many retail companies will not have had any contact with Enterprise Ireland or know our processes. So what we've done with the previous 2 calls is we've organized a workshop for successful applicants, and part of that workshop is to take them through our processes around how you go about claiming the grant to make sure that companies understand the do's and don'ts and what documentation Enterprise Ireland will require from them. So that workshop has been really useful in making sure that that companies aren't penalised by making any mistakes through the claims process. But to answer this specific question, yes, so it is absolutely fine and to be expected that your project manager will also be working on different projects and will have other duties, and that's absolutely fine and to be expected. The way in which we or our grant management department would typically check that the nominated staff member is working on the project would be via timesheets. So we would encourage companies to keep, you know, a fairly simple template which records the amount of time that their nominated project champion has spent on this project, and that makes the claims process much easier at the end of the period when it comes to drawing down the money from Enterprise Ireland.
Okay, thank you, Owen, for that. Mary, this is one for you. How long does the application form take to fill out?
Okay, well, I suppose in terms of filling out the application form, it shouldn't take too long if you have the content ready. What I'd strongly advise is that you download a copy of the application form in PDF format from the website and start thinking about what you want to do, what your plan is, and identifying a service provider. The more planning and strategizing you do now, the better the application. What we want is quality and not quantity in terms of content. Tell it as it is in your own words. I mean, the easier you make it for us to understand your project, the better the application.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Question actually, which I'm going to answer myself. Is it essential retailers need to concentrate on exports? I think you'll see from the way we've weighted the scoring that while we have an expectation that companies would have an ambition to export, the scoring is developed in such a way that it's not prioritized that exports need to be a primary consideration in the first instance. So I would say that it's an ambition piece that you would need to have, okay, as opposed to being absolutely committed to it at this point in time. I think we see this scheme as being supporting the sustainability of the retail industry and trade here in Ireland in the first instance. Owen, perhaps this is one for you then. Okay, if approved for the online retail scheme previously, can I apply for this one?
So the answer is yes, but only if all of the funding approved in the two previous calls that we've had has been fully drawn down and claimed. So if a company was a successful applicant for one of the two previous calls and they've fully completed that project that they had put in an application for, and all of the expenditure, the full amount of the grant has been fully drawn down, and their application that they would put into this call is clearly a separate project, and that's demonstrated to Enterprise Ireland that it's clearly a different project, then that application would be considered eligible. So I hope that's clear. So the answer is yes, but subject to those conditions being met. I should also say that if there's any companies on the webinar that applied for either of the two previous calls and were unsuccessful, we'd very much encourage them to, you know, take this time, take the opportunity of the new call to develop their plan and to submit an application as well for a new project.
Okay, and Owen, while I have you on the mic, actually one more for yourself to answer. If I intend on closing bricks and mortar and going fully online, am I still eligible for this scheme? I had 2 shops and 10 employees, but want to convert to an online only.
So that's one we'll possibly kind of think about and you know, and take back with a response. I think every situation is different, but the rules of the scheme, as Mary had outlined, do require a company to have a retail shop and to be, at the time of application, getting 50% of their, at least 50% of their revenue from those retail stores. And the reason for that is there's obviously lots of companies that just trade online, and that isn't really the focus of this scheme. The focus of this scheme is really to support bricks and mortar retailers with their transition and to build out their online capabilities. So I think that in that instance, it would be very likely that would be problematic, and that would deem the applicant ineligible. But if that company would like to submit their request in a little bit more detail to retail at Enterprise Ireland, we can look at the specific situation and come back to them with an answer.
Okay, thank you, Owen. Mary, just one for yourself. Just 1 second. Our coffee company is developing an online ordering app. It's for a click and collect. Are we qualified to apply for the scheme?
I think it's kind of back down to you know, what Owen was just saying there. There are obviously different business models, you know, being developed at the moment as a result of the crisis. So I think maybe if that company emails us in some more information on retail@enterprise-ireland.com, we can have a look at it and see what they're trying to do.
Okay, I'll take this one myself. Hi, just looking to confirm this scheme is only open to retail with a minimum of 10 employees. My business is property related, i.e. an estate agent. Yes, this really is only related to retail businesses that deal with customers coming in off the street, and we didn't see it as being relevant to the property industry in this context at this point in time. Again, if you want to write in to retail@enterprise-ireland.com, we will consider that further, but this is predominantly intended to support the food and non-food retail business in Ireland, okay, that has been, and I know other industries have been absolutely impacted, okay, but to support the primary retail industry, as we know, with 10 or more employees, with no restriction on the upper end, okay, to move onto an online channel. Just one or two more. Do we need to have 10 full-time employees? Mary, this is probably one, but maybe, sorry, Owen, maybe one for yourself. Do we need to have 10 full-time employees? But if we had a mix of full-time and part-time, how can we be considered or can we be considered in the scheme?
Yes, so it is full-time equivalent employees. So we're conscious that, you know, many retail shops would have some full-time employees and then some part-time employees. What we might do on that one is to put up on the guidance document next week a little table that would help companies calculate how to treat the part-time employees in that calculation.
Okay. Oh, Mary, were you going to add something there?
No, that's fine. I was just noting that.
And there's just one on the accounts, Mary. I might just push this over to you. Accounts no more than 2 years old. So oldest acceptable would be 2018. How many years to be provided? 2
years. We're looking for 2 years accounts. There is a section in the application form as well with asking for some details about turnovers for previous years, but we do require 2 years statutory accounts.
Okay. And
again, the application process, just to reiterate again, the application process is 2 steps. So what happened the last couple of calls is that everybody just submits the application on the day, and you know, it is a 2-step process, so you will need to give yourself enough time to get the email back the accounts, if you know what I mean. It's don't leave it till the last minute to do that, because technology can fail you. It's clunky at the moment with so many people online. So please don't submit everything at the last minute. Just give yourself a bit of time.
And Mary, this is again one for yourself. Okay, can you explain a bit about the internal champion salary and how the impacts of the daily rate of the champion and how that impacts on the daily?
Sure, no problem. The maximum daily rate. Okay, first of all, your internal champion costs can't exceed the costs of your external service provider. In other words, you can't just send in an application with just internal champion costs. You have to have an external. You need to have an external provider with more than 50% of the costs. The maximum daily rate that you can claim for your champion is €200 per day. But that €200 a day is based on their salary. So in other words, if they're only earning €150 a day, that will be capped. It will be capped. We're not going to give you the €200 a day if their salary sheets show that they're only earning €150 a day. So I hope that clarifies it.
Okay. And Mary,
I might just add.
Oh,
I might
sure.
just add to that just very briefly. Thanks, Mary. That was very clear. But just, I suppose we would expect that what we've seen with a lot of the previous applications is that a lot of the time the project champion might be a marketing manager, it might be a director of the company. You know, we do expect that this is a kind of strategic project, and we do want to see that internal champion is going to be able to really drive through the change. And in terms of calculating the daily costs, so to give you an idea, when Mary mentioned the daily rate of €200 for the internal champion, that would equate to an annual salary of about €45,000. So just to give people a sense of what that would mean in terms of the annual salary. So if your project champion has a salary below that, it will mean that the calculation of the daily rate for that piece of the application will be lower than the maximum. You can still apply with a lower salary. It'll just mean that the grant rate might be slightly lower.
Okay. Mary, one for yourself. Does the service provider have to be Irish based?
No, they don't. We're especially if they're planning on exporting. We're happy to look at an external provider who is based in your target market. It may make more sense to do that.
Okay, and then one final one for you, Mary. Okay, why don't you fund Google AdWords? You say that the websites need to be constantly promoted, but yet you won't fund AdWords.
I suppose it comes down to marketing in itself. It's like, you know, I suppose a good practice with marketing is that you do a certain amount of work on your organic or your free, and you do a certain amount, especially if you're in the retail sector, on paid advertising. Paid advertising. So what we want you to do is build up your capability within the company, within your whole web presence, not just to literally take that money and spend it all on paid advertising, which the minute you turn it off, it's gone. Your whole presence just disappears. That's the reason.
And just to add to what Mary said, I fully agree with everything she said, but also from an EU state aid perspective, we're not able to fund those kind of pure day-to-day marketing costs, whereas what we are able to grant fund is that capability, that development of a strategy, and really the implementation of additional functionality and capability for any company. So that's really it's as well as the reason Mary gave, there's an EU state aid restriction on that.
Okay. Owen, while you're answering there, if an eligible project is already well underway, will you fund outstanding costs for the remaining term of the project?
Yes, that is fine to put in an application. What we'll have to do and have to check very carefully and look for evidence of is that you are not able to claim for costs that were incurred before the application was submitted. But if a company has, say, a multi-year strategy and they've mapped out different projects and different blocks of work, and they happen to be kind of in the middle of that plan, and they're looking to for support from this scheme to undertake the next phase of that work. And if those costs haven't already been incurred, then that would be an eligible application, so that would be fine.
Okay. I'll answer this one myself. Hi, the question of service provider, assuming this means the website designer, can this be someone from our staff, an in-house web developer who works alongside our project champion? We're really only allowing one person within a company as a project champion, okay? So the answer is no, we won't allow for 2 people, okay? But we will allow for 1 person. Mary, is there anything that you want to add on to that one, or is that?
No, that's perfect. I mean, I suppose just in terms of the whole thing, just please send your applications in early. Don't leave it till the last minute. That would be my final message on it. Please just, you know, give yourself enough time.
Okay, and actually, Mary, just while you're there, the last one, where can the retailer see the recommended list of providers?
It's on it's on that webpage, www.enterprise-ireland.com/retail, and we will be updating that. We've just updated recently, but we'll be updating that on a regular basis. Again, though, the choice of service provider is up to yourself, provider or providers. You may have more than one, but we would strongly recommend you have a chat with a couple of providers, get a plan together, and make sure that you can work with that person for the next 12 months.
Okay, and Mary, a related one actually, because I know we had to deal with this in the first and second call. If I nominate a service provider in my application, do I have to stick with that provider, or can I change?
No, you can change, but you need to let us know. This is all covered. The last 2 calls, as Owen said earlier, we had we ran 2 workshops, or we ran a workshop after each call. And we brought together all of the successful applicants, and we went through all of the kind of documentation that they need to cover. We also brought in an expert on e-commerce who took them through the whole e-commerce journey and kind of, you know, all of the aspects that you need to think about on e-commerce. So, and as part of that, it's what the process is for changing your consultant, or sometimes maybe even just changing, you know, some of the activities that you want to do, you know, as a result of, you know, hindsight or whatever. And we're happy to look at any of those changes.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I'm going to start to close off now, because I think we've covered a good range of questions there. There are some questions in the chat box that are quite specific, and I don't want to use those in a public environment, okay, just to respect the confidentiality of those people asking those questions. So what I would encourage you, if you have a question that has not been addressed here now, to write to the address as that's on the line there, email at retail at enterprise. I'll get this right yet. Okay, retail at enterprise-ireland.com, and we'll deal with it offline after today. I mean, the one thing I would say in conclusion is that we want to make sure we max out on this scheme here. We want retailers to avail of the grant support, and we want them to be able to use it in a positive way to drive business growth as we look back to rebuilding our economy and rebuilding the so important dynamic retail trade that we have here in Ireland. The one thing that we also saw in the first 2 calls is that just because I'm a 1-shop or a small 2-shop business does not mean that I can't go online. Some of the best applications we got in the first 2 schemes were from small retailers, independent retailers, okay, who had really strong offers. And I would therefore encourage you, although you might be only a 1 or a 2 store operation or whatever, okay, to think about what your real USP is, because at the end of the day, if you want people to come and use your online facility like your own bricks and mortar facility, you have to have a good, strong USP that will cause them to go there. But I have no doubt that we will see again a good array of really strong and positive applications from all sizes of retailers. The one question that was asked was about the regionality of this, and we had taken the regional bias out of this application, because actually in the first 2 calls more applications came from outside of Dublin than actually came from in Dublin, but we just felt that in the current circumstances we didn't necessarily want to differentiate between urban and rural. We're all in this sort of circumstances together, and we need to work together to build and rebuild our economy. So just in conclusion, can I thank everybody for staying online? I see we have still really high attendance. I hope through what Mary has presented and the chats that we've had here that we've addressed a lot of the issues that you might have in terms of making an application. As I said, this webinar is recorded and will be on our website. There's a lot of information that is already there at this point in time, so I would encourage you to start looking at it, okay, and to familiarising yourself with it, and to start thinking about what an application might look like. As I said, we expect the call to open next week. We will then keep it open for 4 weeks, and we will notify everybody who's on this webinar today that the call has opened, so that you will be aware as soon as it is live at this point, for you to start your application. So finally, as well as thanking yourselves for participating, can I thank Mary for her presentation and very clear. Thank you, Mary, and also Owen.
Thanks,
can I thank you as well for handling some of the tricky questions? But these are the reality. These are questions that we want to answer and people need to know. So thank you again for your participation. So can I wish you all the best, okay, and look forward to hearing from any additional inquiries on our email, as I said, retail@enterprise-ireland.com.